So since quite a few of you wanted me to look into this, I decided to go watch it. And impressions? Well, it will take some time to explain. I don't know why you wanted me to look into this cartoon, which is something I still don't think after watching it. Star Wars Clone Wars was made a year after Attack of the Clones, detailing the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, with the second half of the series being a prelude to the film itself. Created by this guy, who was also known for Samurai Jack, which I haven't seen, only heard of, so there will be no comparisons to Samurai Jack, but I will be comparing it to the 2008 Clone Wars movie and the following show. The story? It's there, I suppose. You see, the way the plot was designed kind of makes the story the outline for the entire micro-series. This cartoon doesn't have much of a mind-blowing story, but it's not The Last Jedi either. And it's not even close to being either. It's just there. It reminds me of Doom 2016. The story exists, but it's not trying to be a story. The story is just there to set up the game. I feel that's what's happening here. If I didn't know any better, I'd say the team wanted to do a story, but George Lucas or whoever was responsible only let them do 2 hours for some reason. So they dedicated the series to being about 2 major periods in the Clone Wars, which isn't enough. I kind of see why Filoni had the idea for another Clone Wars show. The micro-series is just too short. I think this series needed more arcs and more of a grip of the story. Because as it is, this story could have been told another way. This could have been a comic for all we know. I think the reason the story was made minimalistic was because this was only a piece of the larger story of the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars multimedia project is better when seen as one story, and the Clone Wars is meant to be a small piece of it. But since the Clone Wars is probably the thing they needed to focus on the most, I don't actually see a point for this cartoon other than to set up Revenge of the Sith in the second half. The story is hard to explain, given how it's told. It's mostly just battles of the Clone Wars with cool new characters such as Dirge, Asajj Ventress, and General Grievous. And of course, our first impressions of these characters are awesome, but they kind of just feel like introductions for more. Without consuming anything else other than the films, this show kind of feels like they skipped over a lot. Ventress just disappears and isn't seen again. And we know she didn't die because of the comics. General Grievous is a case of George Lucas having bad judgment. You see, in the beginning, George wanted Grievous to be shown as a ruthless Jedi killer. And by Revenge of the Sith, he changed his mind and changed the focus on Grievous's personality to an arrogant, cowardly villain. It's important that there is consistency, especially in Star Wars. This may be the reason why many don't like General Grievous. They probably saw this cartoon and it gave them a different impression than the movie. If General Grievous was kept one way, then that would have been fine. I don't think it matters if they show him being an arrogant coward or a ruthless Jedi killer. I think mixing the both actually works in creating an interesting character in the larger picture. But we probably should have seen his arrogant cowardly traits a lot more, not just in this cartoon, but the rest of the Clone Wars multimedia project. This is more George's fault than the series creators, because there's an obvious contrast when going into Revenge of the Sith. I mean, this doesn't ruin either Clone Wars or Revenge of the Sith on their own. As I said, Revenge of the Sith is the best thing in the series, but I think George should stick with one depiction or the other. It's a general rule of storytelling. If Yoda was a wise master in Empire Strikes Back, and then a bumbling idiot in Return of the Jedi, that's going to cause problems, wouldn't it? So depending on whether you think it counts, this could be a valid criticism for Revenge of the Sith. But it gets complicated when you consider that Clone Wars was expanded universe after all. Since the Clone Wars series was too short, I think a lot of things happened too quickly. Anakin is a Padawan in what you assume is the start of the war, but then he becomes a Jedi Knight sometime later. There's not a lot of progression. I think everyone in this show is either okay. It's nice to see more of Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, but his conflict with Obi-Wan is representative of stuff we've already seen. There's no progression. We of course see the arguments between the two, and the scenes of them getting along really well, like what we've seen in Attack of the Clones, but since Anakin is knighted very soon after this, it's really weird when they say Anakin has proven himself through battle. At this point, we've only seen 2 battles, so it's a little jarring. Also, there seem to be things that don't tie into the overall plot. like the stuff that happens on Ilum. I'm not sure what the point of that was. Maybe this micro-series is better structured if you jumped into episode to episode every once in a while on Cartoon Network or something. I don't know. I feel the first half is just a compilation of Clone Wars battles with different Jedi, and the second half is setting up Revenge of the Sith. There's not much to it, so I was hoping for something more, but I'm going to give 6 points to the story. So let's talk about how the series is presented on screen. It's really good. My initial thoughts was that the show looks really cool, but because of the lacking story, I was kind of underwhelmed and kind of tired of seeing battles. And it's a shame because I noticed that the series is shot really well. I guess you could say there's a lot of impressive imagery, but I only wish there was more of a story to go alongside it, so I can't comment much. Everything is supposed to go together, and since the story was really downscaled, there's not much to talk about. I don't exactly have a favourite moment because the story doesn't back any of the moments that well. As for editing, when you're in the middle of the battle it's fine, but since I saw this where episodes were jumbled together, the transition is so awkward because it's like we're going from one story to another story with very little connection. It's really jarring. I'm not going to say I hated it, but I just don't have much positive to say about the editing. I guess when you're in the moment, it's really fantastic. The battle that's happening is seamless, but when it comes to transitioning two separate stories, it isn't natural in the slightest. I'm going to give 5 points to this segment. I love the animation for this series. It's quite impressive that this was made on a TV budget and it looks amazing. Now the animation for the 2008 Clone Wars movie was very held back, and it doesn't blow you away like an animated movie, especially one based on Star Wars should. This series actually feels like it exists within the realm of animation. It feels like a cartoon. The movement is very snappy and slick. It feels like they're fighting an actual war. They utilize the animation a lot. Despite the underwhelming story, the spectacle is amazing. It's a cartoon, so they can go all out of what they show us. There isn't a lot of characterization for the clones, but goddamn are they awesome in this show. They don't speak much, but that's what makes them really cool. They have a job to do, and they'll carry out the Republic's wishes no matter what. They're a slave army, but they are appreciated as a slave army, especially by the audience. The moves the characters pull is over the top, but in a way that fits a cartoon. There's Force Unleashed levels of force use, as well as speeder bike jousting, which despite it being a silly idea, was actually pretty cool to watch, as was everything else. It truly feels like both sides are using experimental tactics to destroy the other in a way that feels like the way George Lucas experiments with filmmaking. The visual design is bloody awesome. The designs suit 2D animation, and it was a mistake trying to put them in a 3D format. The designs are straight off the films, but also have a distinct look to them that gives them their own identity. Anakin and Obi-Wan are easily recognizable in cartoon format, but their designs are great from a cartoon perspective anyways. This is how a cartoon Anakin and Obi-Wan would look like. I have a couple of issues with a few designs because they look too cartoony, because remember, this show is supposed to be in the same continuity as the prequel films. Like, the Muns look really closed in or something. They don't quite look like Muns in other Star Wars media. If Darth Plagueis was in this show, he wouldn't look intimidating at all. The locations are great. They feel closer to the films than the 2008 Clone Wars movie and show does. They use George Lucas's designs and planets as inspirations very well. Like the city on Munalist feels like a mix between Naboo in terms of building structure and ancient Greece actually, so it manages to be different. The planets are so well designed, and the paintings look better because of the 2D nature of the show. It's excellent work. I'm going to give 10 points to this segment. Matt Lucas, no relation to George Lucas, voices Anakin Skywalker. Now that I've watched the OG Clone Wars series, I think this guy's a better fit for Anakin Skywalker than Matt Lanter. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought Anakin was played by the film actor here. Matt Lucas channels the personality, voice, and mannerisms Hayden Christensen had. I have no idea why he was replaced in the 2008 Clone Wars show. I guess it was to be more pandery to prequel haters, I guess. I probably should have said this in the Clone Wars movie review, but Filoni kinda felt like at some points he was truly expanding the prequel trilogy, and at other points felt like he was pandering to prequel haters with small things like changing Anakin's voice enough so he didn't sound that much like Hayden Christensen, and a few other changes too. James Arnold Taylor voices Obi-Wan Kenobi. Everything I said about him is the same as the Clone Wars 2008 movie. I love him. Tom Kane is Yoda. I love his impression. Of course, he doesn't give the same voice as Frank Oz, but he impersonates the character so well that I wouldn't actually mind if he is the replacement for the live-action Yoda when Frank Oz gets old and dies. Not a lot of other characters have very important roles in the series, except for Grey DeLisle as Asajj Ventress, Padme Amidala, Shaak Ti, and Stas Ali, and that's only because she voices 4 characters. To sum up all of her performance as different characters, it's excellent. I especially like her portrayal of Ventress the most. It's definitely better than the portrayal in the 2008 Clone Wars show. I'm going to give 10 points to the voice acting. The music is slight remixes of the film music, and there's one track that reminds me of the battle music on Telos in KOTOR 2, but it's serviceable, and they're implemented well. Sound effects are fine, they get the job done. I don't have a lot to talk about here, because it's mostly same old, same old. I'm going to give 7 points to this segment. Well, this was better than the Clone Wars movie by a long shot. The animation was definitely more impressive than the Clone Wars movie, and even the subsequent show's later seasons to an extent. The OG Clone Wars micro-series has earned a total of 38 points out of 50, equaling a 7.6 out of 10 score. This series was pretty good. Now with that out of the way, my next review should either be The Mandalorian Season 1 or the first episode of The Bad Batch. I'm JJ Plagiarisms. And until next time, what are stories about mystery boxes?